Welcome to Starlight Sci-Fi, where we explore the untold stories of the galaxy. Today, a tale of power, mystery, and a human soldier who shattered the fate of an entire empire. Prepare yourself as we dive into the story of how a simple arrest led to the fall of a galactic empire. The Galactic Empire's reach stretched across countless star systems, a colossal force that brought every planet under its unyielding control. Its officers were trained to believe in the Empire's superiority, their eyes always focused on maintaining the order imposed by centuries of rule. Lieutenant Schwar, an officer in the elite Imperial Army, was one such loyal servant. His missions were simple: follow orders, apprehend fugitives, and ensure the peace. He never questioned the Empire's methods or its goals, for it was all he had ever known. On this particular day, Sor was tasked with an operation that should have been routine: capture a fugitive hiding on one of the Empire's outer colonies. The man, a human by the name of Shadow, was infamous for his ability to evade capture. He was a ghost, slipping through the Empire's iron grip like smoke through fingers. For years, the Empire had hunted him, but he had always escaped their grasp, slipping deeper into the shadows each time. The location of the fugitive had been pinpointed: a small mining colony isolated from the heart of Imperial control was the last known place where Shadow had been spotted. The station was unassuming, a simple outpost that was primarily used for resource extraction. No one suspected the fugitive would be hiding there. The Empire's intelligence was confident that they had cornered their prey. Sor, with his sharp military mind, was confident as well. He had no doubts about the outcome of this operation. It was merely a matter of time before Shadow would be caught. Arriving at the station, Sor assembled a small squad of soldiers and began their sweep through the colony. The residents, ordinary miners and workers, had no idea what was happening. The Empire's military presence was overwhelming, and Jor's team quickly gained control of the outpost. Every corner of the station was searched with military precision, every person interrogated. It was in one of the storage facilities where they finally found him. Shadow, the notorious fugitive, was no more than a man sitting calmly against a wall, his hands in his lap. His expression was serene, almost detached, as though he had expected this moment to come. The soldiers surrounding him were tense, their weapons trained on him, but he didn't flinch. His eyes held no fear, only a calmness that unnerved Sor. At first glance, the man appeared nothing more than a tired criminal, perhaps a petty thief or an outlaw who had spent too long on the run. His clothes were simple, worn from years of travel. His face, though sharp and angular, showed signs of wear, as if he had spent countless nights in darkness, avoiding detection. Nothing about him screamed danger. Nothing about him seemed worthy of the Empire's obsession. Sor stepped forward, gesturing for the soldiers to move in. They restrained the man, securing his hands with binders. The fugitive didn't resist, but his calm demeanor only served to deepen the mystery surrounding him. As Sor stared down at him, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right, that this mission, which should have been simple, was about to take a turn he hadn't expected. The human soldier was arrested, unaware of the true identity he had been hiding all along. The Empire had no idea that the man they thought was a lowly fugitive was someone far more dangerous, someone who had been working in the shadows for far longer than they could ever imagine. Once the fugitive was securely restrained, the Empire's military moved swiftly. Sor ensured that the man was escorted to a high-security holding cell within the facility. The human's calm demeanor remained unchanged as they marched him down sterile hallways, past a maze of locked doors and high-tech surveillance. The soldiers around him were alert, their weapons ready. Every officer knew that Shadow was no ordinary criminal, but they couldn't fully grasp the danger they had just captured. To them, he was just another fugitive who would be swiftly dealt with. The interrogation room was dimly lit, designed to intimidate, its cold metal walls standing like silent sentinels. Sor stood outside the door, watching as the human soldier was pushed inside. He didn't even flinch when the door slammed shut behind him. The man remained motionless, his hands still bound, his expression unreadable. He sat down on the metal chair placed in the center of the room without hesitation, as though he had all the time in the world. His lack of fear unnerved the soldiers. Shore had been briefed on the fugitive's history. Shadow had evaded capture for years, always slipping through the Empire's fingers at the last moment. His file was filled with cryptic reports, little more than rumors and fragmented intelligence gathered from the farthest corners of the galaxy. The Empire knew almost nothing about the man who had become a ghost in their eyes. Yet, they knew enough to see him as a dangerous threat. Despite this, the interrogation was set to be a formality. The officers were confident that once the man was questioned, he would break under the pressure. They had all the resources of the Empire at their disposal, and they believed this fugitive would crumble, but they had underestimated their prisoner. Inside the room, the silence stretched on. Sore watched through a small observation window, seeing the man remain still, his eyes scanning the room as if he were waiting for something. His presence was unnerving in its stillness. The interrogation officer entered and began his questioning, expecting the typical responses of fear and desperation, but the human soldier said nothing. No words, no pleas, not even a hint of defiance, just silence. This silence felt like an impenetrable wall. The officers grew frustrated, trying to provoke a reaction, but the man remained impassive. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, as if he were waiting for the Empire to tire itself out. The more they pushed, the more it became clear that they weren't dealing with an ordinary fugitive. There was a sharpness in his eyes that suggested he was calculating every move, every word, but it wasn't fear he was calculating, it was strategy. He had been in far worse situations before. This was just another game. The minutes stretched into hours, but still, Jade's shadow refused to speak. His silence felt like a riddle the Empire couldn't solve. They had no idea that this was exactly what he wanted. What they thought was surrender was, in fact, a quiet, deadly form of control. As the hours ticked by in the dim interrogation room, Sore began to feel the weight of the situation shift. His initial confidence in the capture of the human fugitive had been replaced with a nagging uncertainty. Something was off. The human, still silent and unyielding, was no ordinary criminal. He was more than just a fugitive. Sore could sense it. There was an air about him that suggested he had been trained for something far more dangerous. But who was this man really? Sore knew the name Shadow only as a whispered legend, rumors of a human who had become an enigma to the Empire. Shadow had always evaded capture, always one step ahead of the Empire's vast intelligence network. For years, his name had been nothing but a shadow in the Imperial reports. Few had seen him in person, and fewer still had lived to speak of it. The intelligence officers who tracked him could never pin down anything concrete about his past. Every mission he undertook was successful, every target eliminated with eerie precision. His reputation was a mix of awe and fear, for no one really knew what he was capable of. But now, here he was, right in the hands of the Empire. As the guards left the interrogation room, Sore stood before the man, his gaze fixed on the unblinking eyes that stared back at him. Jade's face was impassive, unreadable. His posture, though stiff from the restraints, radiated calm and control. It was in his silence that Shore realized the truth. The man before him wasn't just a fugitive. He was someone who had lived in the shadows of the galaxy for far longer than anyone realized, a ghost who had honed his skills into a deadly art. The more Shore thought about it, the more it became clear Shadow wasn't just an outlaw. He was an assassin, a hired killer of exceptional skill. The rumors whispered about him were true. Jade had never been a part of any military faction, nor had he ever answered to any government. He had worked in the shadows, eliminating targets for those willing to pay for his services. It wasn't money that drove him, though it was precision, efficiency, and a deadly sense of justice. He was a hitman, one whose targets had included powerful leaders and criminal organizations across the galaxy. It was then that the true scale of the mistake hit Shore. The Empire had captured something far more dangerous than a fugitive. They had imprisoned one of the most skilled assassins in the galaxy, and they were treating him like any other criminal. They had no idea who they were dealing with. The Empire had been so focused on capturing Shadow, they never considered what might happen if he chose to act. Sore's mind raced as the implications of this realization began to unfold. Jade was no ordinary prisoner. His presence in the Empire's grasp was far from accidental. He had been waiting for this moment. A soldier like Shore couldn't possibly understand what this man was capable of, but deep down, Shore felt the stirring of something dark, something far more dangerous than a simple criminal. The human soldier was no longer just a threat, they were a ticking bomb, and Shore was standing on the edge of the countdown. The Empire's overconfidence grew with each passing hour. They were certain that they had the upper hand. The station's security was on high alert, and the highest-ranking officers had gathered to discuss the next steps. A public execution was already planned, a grand spectacle designed to serve as both a demonstration of the Empire's strength and a warning to anyone who dared to challenge its authority. Shadow, the so-called fugitive, would be made an example of. His capture would show the galaxy that the Empire was unbreakable, that no rebel, no outlaw, no human could escape its grip. As the officers discussed their strategy, they failed to consider one crucial detail. The man they had captured wasn't just any criminal. They had underestimated him, seeing only a fugitive who had finally been caught, a small piece in their vast network of criminals and rebels. But Jade, the Hitman, was unlike anything they had ever faced. He was the calm before the storm, a figure of silent menace who knew the art of survival better than anyone. Within the holding cells, Jade remained silent, his mind already working, already planning. The officers believed that their prisoner was simply waiting for his fate, resigned to the inevitable. But Jade was biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Empire's guards, so focused on their control, had no idea that they were walking straight into a trap. The more the Empire flaunted its power, the more vulnerable they became. Jade's silence was his greatest weapon. Every moment of stillness, every second that passed without him giving in, worked in his favor. The Empire's leadership believed that their victory was imminent, and as they made their plans for his execution, they grew more careless. Their arrogance clouded their judgment. They didn't see the cracks in their security. They didn't realize that their carefully constructed empire was starting to crumble from within. Then, in the dead of night, the first signs of chaos began. The power flickered, briefly dimming the lights throughout the station, and alarms began to sound. Officers scrambled to respond to what they assumed was a minor technical malfunction, but the systems were down far more than a simple glitch. The station's central control was under attack. The Empire's security, designed to be invincible, had been compromised. Jade had made his move. In an instant, he was free. The very system that had been designed to hold him in place became his means of escape. He moved like a shadow, undetected and unstoppable. His training had prepared him for moments like this, moments when everything seemed lost, but the opportunity was right in front of him. The Empire had no idea what hit them. Guards and officers, once confident in their security, fell one by one as Jade silently dismantled their defenses. Each step he took brought him closer to his goal, closer to the heart of the station. The Empire's commanders, once so sure of their control, watched in disbelief as their forces were picked off, one by one. Jade was everywhere, and yet nowhere. He didn't need to fight them head-on. He didn't need to show himself. His expertise in stealth and strategy had always been his greatest strength. And now, as the Empire's arrogance and complacency caught up with them, it became their downfall. Jade wasn't just evading capture, he was dismantling the very system that had sought to imprison him. The Empire, so proud of its might, was now nothing more than prey. By the time the Empire's leadership realized the depth of their mistake, it was already too late. The central command room, once bustling with activity and filled with the confidence of Imperial officers, had descended into chaos. The station's security feeds were scrambled, and the once flawless surveillance system began to display nothing but static and corrupted images. The air was thick with panic as commanders rushed to understand what was happening. They had expected to hold control, to execute their captured fugitive in front of a cheering crowd, a victory to be broadcast across the galaxy. Instead, they were now faced with an unprecedented breach. Reports came in that guards were being taken out silently, one by one, in a manner that no one could explain. There were no loud explosions, no firefights, just a series of mysterious disappearances. It was like the station itself had been infiltrated by a ghost, one who knew how to exploit every weakness in the Empire's sprawling infrastructure. Officers scrambled to restore order, but their efforts were futile. The station's communications system had been tampered with, and the entire facility seemed to be under attack from within. It was during this disarray that Jade made his move. The corridors that had once echoed with the sound of boots and the hum of Imperial technology were now eerily quiet. Jade moved through them as if he had always belonged there, slipping past the remaining guards with ease. His footsteps were soft, barely audible. As he moved through the shadows, bypassing checkpoints, disabling security measures, and taking out the soldiers who stood in his path. His training was unparalleled, and now, with every step, the Empire's seemingly invincible fortress was being dismantled from within. The officers in the command room were oblivious to the depth of the threat they faced. They believed their best soldiers would regain control soon, that the intruder could not possibly outmaneuver the Empire's might. But they were wrong. Jade wasn't just a prisoner anymore, he was a force of nature, an unstoppable storm that had been quietly gathering strength. As the last of the station's defenses fell, the Empire's confidence shattered, and panic began to spread like wildfire. Soar, who had been watching the chaos unfold from the command center, now understood the full extent of their failure. The human soldier they had captured wasn't just a fugitive, they had underestimated him in ways they couldn't even begin to comprehend. Jade was not only escaping, he was turning the Empire's own systems against them. He was exposing the flaws in the very foundation of the Empire's power. There was no one left to stop him. As Jade neared the heart of the station, the true scale of the operation began to reveal itself. His plan had been executed flawlessly. The Empire's arrogance had made them complacent, and now they were paying the price. With every step, Jade grew closer to his goal. His mission wasn't just about escaping. It was about sending a message, one that would ripple across the galaxy and leave the Empire forever changed. The storm that had been unleashed was unstoppable, and there was no turning back. The heart of the station was where the final showdown would take place, and Jade knew it well. The Empire's central command was located in the deepest, most secure area of the station. It was a fortress within a fortress, where the highest-ranking officers gathered to control the station's vast operations. The guards here were hand-picked from the Empire's finest soldiers, trained to protect the heart of their power at any cost. But as Jade silently made his way toward this critical location, it became painfully clear that no amount of security or preparation could stop him. The last remaining guards were scattered, disorganized, and terrified. The Empire's once proud military machine was now in disarray. As Jade moved through the hallways, he saw signs of the chaos he had unleashed, doors left open in haste, soldiers cowering behind cover, systems that were meant to be impenetrable now failing one after another. The attack had been swift and precise. The Empire's once invincible fortress had become its prison. Jade, moving like a shadow, had turned the tables on the very system that had captured him. At the same time, Shore was becoming more desperate. His mind raced as he tried to piece together the disaster unfolding before him. He had been trained to lead, to make decisions that would preserve the Empire's dominance. Yet here he was, watching as that dominance was stripped away, piece by piece, at the hands of a single human. The sense of helplessness gnawed at him as he saw his command unraveling. Every tactical advantage, every precaution, had been breached by a single prisoner. The realization hit him with a cold, harsh finality. They had completely underestimated Jade. By the time Soar and the remaining officers arrived at the control room, they found nothing but empty hallways. The command center, the very core of the station, was eerily silent. No soldiers, no sign of life. Just the cold hum of the station's failing systems. The alarms had ceased, replaced by the stillness of defeat. Jade was already in the heart of the station, deep within the command center, his mission almost complete. The power that had once been in the hands of the Empire now lay in his control. Inside the command center, Jade stood before the central terminal, his fingers moving swiftly over the controls. His objective was clear. He needed to disable the station's communication array, render the Empire's remaining forces powerless, and erase any trace of the Empire's control over this remote sector of the galaxy. The once unassailable network of communications that had allowed the Empire to enforce its rule was now his to command, or more precisely, to dismantle. As Jade worked, the final pieces of his plan began to fall into place. He had studied the station's layout, its systems, its weaknesses, all in silence. Every step he had taken had been part of a larger design, one that would shake the very foundation of the Empire's authority. There was no escape now for the officers who had once thought themselves invincible. They were just pawns in a game they didn't understand, caught in a trap they couldn't even begin to perceive. Jade had already won, and as he watched the systems blink and die one by one, he knew that the galaxy would soon know the full extent of the Empire's vulnerability. The storm had passed, and only the echoes of its destruction remained. As Jade's fingers hovered over the final control panel, he couldn't help but feel a sense of satisfaction. The Empire's systems, once designed to subdue and control, were now under his command. The last few keystrokes he entered ensured that no communication would leave this station, no distress signal would reach the Empire's reinforcements. The network, which had been the lifeblood of the Empire's far-flung operations, was now nothing more than a collection of useless code. As the terminal screen blinked, signaling the complete shutdown of the station's core functions, Jade allowed himself a moment of quiet reflection. This had been more than just an escape. This was retribution. He had made sure that every last bit of the Empire's infrastructure was compromised. The satellite communication grid, the planetary defenses, the command protocols, everything was now under his control or completely destroyed. He wasn't just a fugitive anymore. He had become an agent of chaos, a harbinger of the downfall of the Empire's arrogance. He had not only destroyed the hold the Empire had over this station, but he had sent a message to the entire galaxy: no system, no government, no empire was untouchable. The Empire had built its power on the backs of its enemies, thinking itself invincible, and now Jade had proven just how fragile that belief really was. Jade turned away from the now dead control panel, his mind already moving to the next phase of his plan. The station would be left to its slow collapse, its once proud military forces now scattered and leaderless. Jade had one final piece to complete before his mission could truly be considered a success escape. The station's automated evacuation systems had already been disabled, leaving the remaining personnel stranded, without hope of rescue. As he moved through the empty corridors, Jade could hear the faint sounds of chaos growing behind him. The remaining officers and soldiers, now fully aware of their failure, were scrambling in panic, desperately trying to reclaim control of what was left, but Jade knew it was too late. The Empire's grip had slipped, and it was only a matter of time before the rest of the galaxy would hear of its fall from grace. In this forgotten corner of space, the once mighty Empire had been struck down by a single man, and no one would be able to ignore the consequences. Soar, who had been hunting this shadow for years, had now become a symbol of the Empire's collapse. He, along with the remaining officers, was left behind in a crumbling station, helpless to reverse the damage Jade had wrought. They would have to explain how they let a single prisoner, a single human, outmaneuver them so thoroughly. It would be their downfall as much as the Empire's. Jade finally reached the hangar bay, where his escape craft waited. He didn't need to hurry. The Empire's reinforcements wouldn't arrive for hours, and by then he would be long gone, free to disappear once again into the shadows. As he entered the ship and sealed the hatch, he glanced one last time at the station's viewports, watching the dying lights flicker across the dark expanse of space. With a final quiet exhale, Jade piloted the craft into the void. The Empire's arrogance had been its undoing, and he, the human Hitman, had become the instrument of its reckoning. There was no grand victory speech, no applause for the revolution, just the quiet, cold reality of a galaxy now aware of how fragile the Empire truly was. The storm was over, and Jade had left his mark on history. One man, one mission, and an empire brought to its knees. In a galaxy ruled by power, it was the quietest of heroes who changed the course of history. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey. Don't forget to subscribe to Starlight Sci-Fi for more stories from the stars. Until next time, keep looking up.